What does a boomerang player drink to quench his thirst? Spring water! Eh? Eh? You don't know humor. Hello everyone, welcome back to Chain of Commander, your source for general chit-chat on the Commander format. This is your Commander-in-Chief, Billy G here, coming to you with this month's spicy deck tech of the month. Now, I am super pumped for this list. I've been tuning it for the past couple of months, and I'm really happy with where it ended up. And get this, if you were to hop on TCG Player right now and order it, it would only be $100 sans shipping. So a perfectly reasonable budget Commander deck as well. And for your convenience, I have put a deck list to this full list below so that you can access at your leisure. Now, before we get into it, I do want to say, if you end up enjoying this video, definitely consider subscribing. I do spicy deck techs at least once a month. I do other types of deck techs as well, and just other casual kind of talk about deck building intricacies of the Commander format. So definitely consider sticking around if you like what I have to say. That said, let's get into this. The Commander we are bringing to the table today is Heidar, Rimewind Master, and his bouncy blue buddies. Bouncy, get it? Spring, water, there's the penguins, a bunch. Never mind. Heidar, Rimewind Master, is 4 and a blue, legendary creature, human wizard, and for 2 and tapping it, you can return target permanent to its owner's hand, but you can only play that ability if you control 4 or more snow permanents. Snow. Nice. And he's a 3/3. So, when I see this card, I think 2 things. Cold, shivering winter months, and I cry a little bit inside, and bouncy balls. And I cheer up a little bit too. So we're going to be doing a lot of bouncing with this deck. This deck, just get ready to bounce with me. Bounce with me. I don't know why I do this. But we got to start out somewhere. And like I do with most of my deck techs, we start out with the ramp. Now, we're in mono blue, so ramp is not the easiest thing to come by. But we got a couple tips here to kind of make it work. We have Arbiter of the Ideal, which is on the higher end of the curve, but when he taps, you can just really bring anything in from the top of your deck. Any, like a creature or land, it just brings it in, but it is also an enchantment, which has no interaction with the rest of the deck here, so don't worry about that. Dreamscape Artist, to turn extra cards in your hand into more land cards on the battlefield. Silvermer, just your casual dork. Scare Tiller, which can either let you put a land from your hand to the field or from your graveyard to the field whenever he untaps. Walking Atlas, which you can tap to put a land into play. He's going to be an important one. We'll get to him a bit more later. Gearper Ori, which doubles the amount of land drops you and the rest of the table can get per turn. And if any player has 0 cards in hand at their upkeep, they draw 3 cards instead of drawing their normal cards. So this affects everybody, but the way we play this deck, your opponent should never have an empty hand. They should always keep having the same hand over and over again. We have Midnight Clock, which after 12 counters are put on it, also acts as a bit of a time twister for you there. Pendant of Prosperity. This one's kind of an interesting one. It puts a little bit of politics, a little bit of team playing into the field. You give this to an opponent. They can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card and put a land onto the battlefield. And whenever they activate that ability, you get to do it as well. So make a buddy at the table, be friends, and you both can benefit from this. It'll be great. Then we have Arcane Signet, which just taps for blue here. Cold Steel Heart, which taps for blue and produces snow mana because it is a snow permanent. And Sky Diamond, which enters tap but taps for blue. Then we also have Soul Ring, which taps for the double colorless. It's Soul Ring, you know what it does. And then we have 3 lands dedicated to helping us ramp here. We have Isolated Watchtower, which you can activate to reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a land you put on the battlefield, but you need to have less lands than an opponent to do this. So it's more of playing catch up, which there's going to be some points where that comes in handy. We got Mirroring Landscape, which lets you go fetch to get two islands in this situation. And Terrain Generator, which you can pay 2 and tap it to, just put another basic land in the battlefield. Just boop, like that. So 3 lands to help us ramp a little bit more. We'll get to the rest of the mana base later. Then we are in blue, so the things we do have good access to will be like card draw and card advantage. So first one we have here, a newer card. We have Baron Tolarian Archmage, which you can draw a card at your end step if you bounce something to your hand this turn. Like I said, we're all about the bouncing here. So there's going to be plenty of cards going in our hand. We're going to be drawing plenty of cards off of him. A lot of synergies right there. Powerhouse, very good card. We have Fathom Seer, which is a morph that when you flip it over, you get to draw 2 cards. We have Nezahal, Primal Tide. So whenever an opponent plays an instant or sorcerer, we get to draw. And we have, you know, no maximum hand size. Compulsive Research, which essentially just cantrips. Preordain, another cantrip. Gush. Draw 2 cards, but it has an alternate cost of just bouncing 2 islands to your hands. I think you see where this is going, folks. We have Azor's Gateway. This is more card filtering, unless you go through the deck, and if you somehow get enough different CMCs underneath him, he flips into quite a powerful mana rock that can tap for mana equal to your life total. So that could come in pretty clutch later. Biden of Thassa, which does 2 things here. When your creatures do damage to a player, you get to draw some cards, and you can force opponents to attack on their turn. So it can be used as kind of a political tool here. Force people to get into unwanted attacks. So useful tool, useful tool. We got a couple vehicles. We have Silent Submersible, which draws a card when it does damage. And then we have Smuggler's Copter. Smuggler's Copter, aka the Looter Scooter, which whenever it attacks or blocks, you get to draw a card and discard a card. Then we got a couple other things. We got the Eeyore Rune Expedition, which can draw you some cards when you get enough the something there. It's over here or over here. I'll read it. And Mystic Remore, which lets you draw when an opponent plays a non-creature spell and doesn't decide to pay just 4 measly mana. Come on, guys. Don't be so stingy. You can just pay the 4. And then we have Merit Lage's Slumber. This is a newer card from Modern Horizons. It lets you scry your upkeep, and once you have 10 snow permanents, which we can get to very easily in this deck, boom! You get a 20/20 indestructible named Merit Lage. Tentacles. Ooh, I think it's just an avatar. And then Trade Routes, which lets us turn extra cards in our hand, extra lands in our hands to extra cards, and you can bounce lands to your hand to trigger other things that you'll see in this deck. Then we get up to the removal, and our removal kind of comes in 2 primary forms. We have being able to bounce things to hands, obviously, seems to be the theme of the deck, and the other one is tapping things down, normally for more than just 1 turn. So we start off with the Rimewind Taskmage, which can tap or untap something, Tidal Bore, which can tap or untap something, and has the alternate cost of bouncing an island to your hand, Breaching Leviathan, which taps all the non-blue things, so that you can maybe get an attack. Elder Deep Fiend, which can tap 4 things down when it enters the battlefield. Lorthos the Time Maker, which when he attacks, you can pay 8 to tap 8 things. You know, 8. Leviathan, Lorthos, Octopus, 8. You get it, you get it. Guardian of Tazim, which when like a land enters the battlefield, you can tap something down, and if that land's an island, it stays tapped for an extra turn. Tide Force Elemental, another landfall tapper. And then Royal Elemental, a landfall taker. You can take a creature from your opponent and keep it for as long as you keep Royal Elemental. You have Aether Spellbomb, which is an artifact that can bounce something back to their opponent's hand. You have Vidalcan Shackles, which is an artifact taker. You can take somebody's creature and keep it for as long as you keep the Vidalcan Shackles tapped. Then we have some more wider board clears here. We have Flooded Shoreline, which is a repeatable remover. You can pay 2 blue and bring 2 islands back to your hand to return any permanent, any creature or something back to their opponent's hand. You have Time of Ice, which is Saga. It starts tapping things down, then it bounces all the tapped creatures back to the hands. You got Winter's Rest, which just taps things down. Then we go to Boomerang. You might remember that from the joke at the beginning. Which can bounce something. And Commit to Memory, which both can bounce something, can counter a spell without actually countering it. And if it's in your graveyard, it's a Time Twister effect. So you get to refill your hand later if you need it. Then we have Scourge of Fleets, which bounces opponents' creatures. Engulf the Shore, but that can bounce everybody's creatures. And Whelming Wave, which bounces everything but some of our bigger guys out there, like our Leviathans and whatnot. We have Ensnare, which taps all the creatures, but you can also bounce islands to your hands as an alternative cost. And Winter's Chill, Winter's Chill is kind of a weird card. You can only cast a spell during combat before blockers are declared. And you can cast it for X and a blue, where X cannot be greater than the number of snowlands you control. Weird effect, but you know, it's an old card. And then you get to choose X of the target attacking creatures, and for each of those creatures, your opponent chooses to pay either 1 or 2. If that player doesn't pay 1 or 2, that creature is destroyed. If they pay 1, then that creature doesn't do any combat damage for the turn. And if they pay 2, then they get to keep just doing the attack, you know. That's what I mean. It's a kind of a complicated card. Also, being in blue, we'll obviously have some amount of ways to protect ourselves here. So we got some counter spells, got some protection. We have Blizzard Strix, which can blink something, and we can use that to kind of protect one of our own things from a board clear or target removal. We have Rimewind Cryomancer, which has the ability to counter activated abilities. We got the classics and counterspell and negate. We have Foil, which can counter something, and you can discard an island as an alternative cost, and because we're bouncing a lot of islands to our hands, that might be easy enough to do. We have Thwart, which also counters something, but has the alternate cost of bouncing islands to your hand. A whole bunch of them, so a bunch of islands going to our hands. Let's see if we can make something of that. We have Misdirection, which can change the target of a spell. Narset's Reversal, which kind of bounces the spell back to your opponent's hand, and you get a copy of it. And Remand, which just bounces it back to their hand, and you draw a card. For Planeswalkers, we only got one. It's Narset, part of Veils. There's going to be, like we said, we had a couple Time Twister effects in here. Having her out there when you either cast the Memory of Commit to Memory or use the Ori from earlier, and somebody goes to draw 3 cards, works very nicely with those. Of course, your opponents aren't going to like to see her. I like her. And then we have some payoffs, because obviously we need to actually win at some point. We have the Balduvian Conjurer, which can turn your lands into creatures. We have the Balduvian Frostwaker, which also can turn your lands into creatures, so we have a way to kind of chip in when everybody's things are all tapped down. We have Frostwalk Bastion, which is a creature land. Hostile Desert, which is another creature land, and Fairy Conclave, another creature land. So 3 more lands we're kind of putting in here. Ways that we could get damage in while our opponent's boards are all tapped down. We have Rime Feather Owl. This is just a big beater whose power and toughness is equal to the amount of snow permanents you control, and you can turn things into snow permanents, which, I mean, I guess you can make him a little bit bigger if you have the mana for it, but doesn't really do much else for the turn. But he does fly, so he can get in there for a bunch of damage. Good stuff. We have Pursued Whale. He's just a big threat that's hard for your opponents to remove because they got to pay that extra 3 to even target him. And then we have Stormtide Leviathan, which cannot be blocked because he has Island Walking. He turns everything into islands. And only things with Island Walk or Flying can attack. So that's where your Rime Feather Owl and a couple of the other flyers that we had put in there can get in there, and he can get in there while nothing else really can get in there. So it turns off some of your things, but it'll probably turn off all of your opponent's things. And then, remember how I was saying that one Scarecrow guy from the beginning, the Walking Atlas, he's going to come up big? We have Retreat to Coralhelm, which is the enchantment that has a couple landfall abilities, but the one we care about is specifically the one that says when a land enters the battlefield, you may tap or untap target permanent. You tap your Walking Atlas, you put a land in, that triggers, you untap your Atlas, and then you can do it again. There will be turns where you're going to be returning several islands back to your hands, and you might have 5 or 6 islands, and you just go and drop 6 islands all at once and just do it all again next turn. This is like the crux of this deck performing at the highest ability can. So kind of important you get it out there. Otherwise, you're going to be paying more normal costs. But man, if you get this out there, it feels absolutely great. And then we get on to mana. Every deck needs a mana base. We have our desert package. You know that I like my deserts. We have Desert of the Mindful, which is the one that can just cycle. Ipnu Rivulet, which can mill somebody 4 if you need to do so. And Scavenger Grounds has a little bit of way to hate on the graveyards out there. You have Castle Vantress, which gives you the option to scry 2. We have Carol Atoll, which kind of, it's a weird old card that when it enters, you got to sack a land, but it produces double mana. So it's a neat card, a way to get something into your graveyard, land in your graveyard for Hostile Desert if you need it. And Soldavi Excavations, which does kind of the same thing as Carol, but also gives you the option to scry. So having a scrying is quite nice. We have Field of Ruin for a little bit of land removal, along with the Ghost Corner, more land removal, and Mouth of Ronom, which is tiny creature removal, and mid-sized creature removal, does 4 damage to target creature. We have Mystic Sanctuary to allow you to put something from your graveyard back on the top of your deck. And Scrying Sheets, which if the top card of your deck is a snow permanent, you could just put it into your hand. We have a lot of snow permanents in this deck, so you might be using that more than you think. And then for our basics, we have 20 snow-covered islands. Now, how does this deck win? Excellent question. You are controlling the board. You are playing Traffic Cop for the table. You will be bouncing things. You will be tapping them down. You will be attacking for incremental damage. You got to take your time. It's not something you can just go out and boom win with. You have to know which threats are the ones to take care of, know how to take care of them efficiently, and slowly attack with the board. Once you get your bigger Leviathan style things out there, you can kind of speed up the clock a little bit. But it is a value-driven deck. It's about incremental advantages and being able to assess your threats properly and handle them accordingly. So, a lot of fun, an amazingly complex deck for the budget that we came with. Like, for $100, this is a very involved and fun deck. It is a blast. So, what do you guys think of this deck? Does this seem like a kind of deck that you would play? Does it seem completely absurd? Because it is. I'm absurd. You're absurd. No, you are. I am. Let me know. Let me know down there in the comments below. And while you're down there, like I said, there's that subscribe button. If you've already subscribed, thank you incredibly much. You guys don't understand how much that means to me. I have been enjoying this YouTubing experience, and I would love it if you haven't subscribed yet to consider joining me going forward. I'll see you guys later. You take care. Bubbly, bubbly, woo.